Welcome back to the Soul Centered Attorney Podcast, where we go over the good, the bad, and the ugly of starting and running your own law firm in the age of AI. Today, I had the privilege of sitting down with Anthony Bribriesco. Anthony is a dedicated trial lawyer, a trial consultant, published author, teacher, and skilled storyteller. He is a partner at Bribriesco Law Firm, where he actually practices with his dad and his brother. He is responsible for several multi-million-dollar verdicts that he has earned for his clients. But what actually inspires me even more than that about him is the fact that he sees the courtroom as more than just a battleground. He sees it as a space for healing, empowerment, and transformation. He is a graduate from the Trial Lawyers College, where I actually first met him. And he is a dedicated student to his craft. And beyond, above that, he really prides himself in being a family man. He loves his family, he loves his clients, his trial team. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Anthony Bribriesco. Anthony Bribriesco, how are you, man?
I'm doing really well. I'm doing really well. It's great to see you and hear your voice. So it's a good day.
Heck yeah. And we talked a tiny bit before we hit record about the fact that we get to celebrate Cinco de Mayo together here on this together.
Yeah, it was not planned, but I just think it was great. When we were at I think a couple TLC regionals, that people were like, "Hey, are you guys related?" And I'm like, "No, but I would be honored to ever be mistaken as part of your family, baby. I
Uh,
love you, and yeah, this is a super cool opportunity. So thank you."
it's mutual, man, and yeah, man. I think we need to start saying that we are related, man, because I consider you my brother.
There you go. Nice.
Yeah, man. Well, so we're here to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly about starting and running your own law firm. And I can't think of anybody else more qualified. You've been doing that for quite a while. Um, and I always, if you're okay with, or I always like to start with your story, man. You know, how did you first decide to become an attorney?
Sure. I'm very, very close to my family. And so talking about my heritage and also my family is a big part of why I became a lawyer. Now that's a little bit different why I stayed a lawyer, because if you're like me, questioning whether I'm on the right path, if I'm on the right career, has been a constant in my life. But at this moment, I feel like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. So going to the beginning, so my grandparents on both sides were born in Mexico. Well, to be more accurate, my mom on my dad, or my grandmother on my dad's side, was born in Mexico, a small town in Zacapo, Michoacan. And my dad's dad, um, he was not born in Mexico, but he actually came and was visiting family. His father was sick, and that's where he met my grandmother. And so there's each one has an amazing story. And on my mom's side, both my mom's mom and my mom's dad, it was a situation where they grew up in right along the border of Mexico and Texas, and the border actually crossed them. And
Mm.
so to be very accurate, the heritage on both my side. Um, and when I think about just kind of where my grandparents began, um, at some point, for whatever reason, my grandfather on my dad's side, he felt that lawyers and doctors were a noble profession. And he told my dad, "You're either going to be a doctor or a lawyer." My dad says he was too dumb to question it, and he decided to become a lawyer, where he met my mom in law school. And back then, there was a Chicano house or Chicano organization. There was, I think, a total of 4 people in Iowa City. Two of the people were married, and the other two are my parents. And so eh, I think my dad, so the vision of becoming a lawyer, it's a lot older than me. And it was something that I was so close to my family. It's something that I decided to be a part of that dream. But I've made it my own, which I think is really, really important. And so I work with my dad and my brother. And so at this point, we have 5 attorneys, which is a lot for our law firm. And so I think we still qualify as a small law firm, um, but very proud.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. And then, uh, so do you remember like, were you so young when you first decided to become an attorney yourself, or?
Sure. So my dad constantly talked about the same thing that his grandfather talked about: is you're going to be either a doctor or a lawyer. And I wasn't really sure that that was something that I wanted to do. And what was kind of, I don't know, it's just interesting is in college, I actually majored in economics. It was like very, very math based. I loved math and logical. But as a lawyer, I have just been studying the humanities, storytelling, just client counseling, things. That's so much important. So I think it was when I was interning with my dad's law firm, and when I saw one of his clients who was an injured worker, she just broke down. Her life had turned upside down. She had basically lost her job. They were cutting off workers' compensation benefits, and so most people's health insurance, it's connected to their job. And so I was able to see my dad bring compassion to the situation and be able to objectively help her, because getting her money meant the difference between her family making it and not making it. So I think that was the moment when I knew that even though this was something that was originally not my dream, it was something that I'm like, I want to do this. I want to learn more, and I became motivated. I think that was in college, and so that's I. The next logical step was to apply to law school.
Nice. Cool, man. And then I've never asked you this before, but did you right out of law school, did you start with your dad?
Yes, I did. And so I was lucky enough. I got into a few different law schools, but I decided to come to the University of Iowa because the becoming a lawyer, a big part of that was practicing with my dad.
Mm.
And so then being really close to my younger brother, I know that his plan was also to come join our firm. And so I just started working with my dad. In fact, after being sworn in, the next week I was in a trial with my dad.
Wow.
Um,
That is awesome. That's a good way to get some trial experience, man, right away.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Cool, man. And then so you start at the law firm. What did you start in the role of a like a traditional associate role, or did you have, a little bit more, what kind of role did you start at, and how has that evolved?
Absolutely. And so my dad has had associates. So right now we're talking about my dad's firm. And so approximately 10 years ago, we switched over to my dad, me and my brother, all equal owners of the Bribriesco law firm. But when I started out, it was very much my dad's law firm. And he had had associates in the past, but they never had become like long-term associates. And so I think what's important to keep in mind was how my relationship with my dad evolved over the years. Because when it began, I think it was kind of like that balance between like he was very comfortable with being like basically hands on doing everything and I watched, or kind of like, here it is, just go for it, but not kind of that in between structure because I don't think that's something that he grew up with. Um, he was a prosecutor, and it was the old trial by fire. He got sworn in, and he had a whole bunch of cases with very little guidance. And so, I've actually spent a lot of time trying to empathize or role reverse with him, but it was a situation where it's like, you know, I, I don't know. It was not what I had expected. And so with and being a young lawyer, it's that struggle. One, the imposter syndrome, being afraid of like everything because it's new. And then wanting to do as much as you can. I was very much, and in that situation, what I did is I took whatever little money I had and I tried to go to as many different trial colleges as I could and just learn as much as I could. And I would wake up early, study the specialties. Workers' compensation was one of them, car collisions was another. uh, I would just study CLE outlines, make my own outlines and practice, and then try and learn as much as I could, just trying to gather as much. Because even though my dad was there and very much willing to do it, and I could watch him at a certain point, I wanted to do more. And so I just tried to use the time I had, even though I had very little experience, learning as much and trying as much as I could, to basically not mess up.
That's that's I think I've told you I used to practice. I got to practice with my sister,
Hmm.
and that family dynamic was awesome. We still practice. We actually still handle some cases together, um, and it comes with its challenges of kind of trying to navigate the business relationship with and also still stay cordial enough. I mean, when challenging things come up, how did you navigate that? Especially you talked about how you went from being more of an associate, being your dad's firm, to transitioning it over to being a partner type role.
Just having the benefit of being, my dad being a plaintiff's lawyer by the time, and specializing that by the time I was interning at his firm. I was able to, I mean, he would literally take us on vacations to American Association for Justices, like CLEs, AHAs, right? And so I was familiar with the organizations and people that also worked in family law firms. And I saw firms that didn't work out, and just that people couldn't, or the relationship. Uh, and so I think, my dad was a coach for me in many sports, and in particular, he was a coach
Mm,
for wrestling.
mm,
And he really cared. But it's just, I kind of like, the easiest way to talk about it is like a rite of passage,
mm,
where at some point he had to see me, and I had to see myself, not as his son, not as someone he's coaching, but as an equal. And
mm,
that takes a lot of courage, because I whether it was just, he loved me no matter what, and I loved him, but it's a certain matter of just in anything, that rite of passage. And it was just, I think, maybe a little bit more of a thing for me because it was my dad. But I feel like every young attorney has to go through that, has to claim, I'm ready, I'm confident, whether it's,
mm,
telling an older attorney, even who's a great mentor, to kind of like, hey, back off, I've got this. But I think there was a lot of those moments, and to my dad's credit, at each time when I was at a breaking point, I'm saying like, hey, things need to change, he changed.
mm,
And so when we have meetings, even though I might sound like a broken record, I just repeat that the reason why we're so successful is because that we trust each other and we have faith
Mm,
in each other because there are times, especially during the pandemic, where things were not great, right, financially. But interestingly enough, when things are great, that also poses a risk or a danger to any
mm,
relationship or any group. Because I think what I've been focusing on, in particular this year, is just how to have difficult conversations with people that you love, right? Because you can't let it build up, and there's obvious things, and then approaching it at a systems level. Even though we only have 5 attorneys, but one attorney just completely changes the dynamic. And like I said, I've um, the faith and trust I have and then the people I work with, my dad, my brother, and the other lawyers, is I think why we're able to start growing and working together in different ways.
mm. And as far as that rite of passage that you mentioned, was that like was it a specific like uh case, a specific, or was it more of a process for you? How 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 did that happen for you?
I think it's multiple things. It just starts with
Yeah.
like, and like I try to remind like our new associate, I'm like, hey, you're walking into a firm that my dad, started like a long time ago. Now I know it's a different firm, but it's just like, when somebody's been doing something however they want, especially as a solo practitioner, to change is different. So this is a small example, but my dad had his office and he also had our big library conference room, but he loved working out of the conference room and having his paralegals come. So when you only have one conference room and your dad's working out of there and you got to use the conference room, that's an example of like, hey man, I got a deposition happening. Could you move? And eventually he understood that maybe he should just like work out of his office, like those
Mm,
types of things.
gotcha.
Yeah, I mean those are little things, but I also think the bigger things was I had, and I've told this story a lot, and so I can tell that I could jump to the. I'm going to jump to the end, and then maybe during our talk, I can tell you about that. But one of the things that's important to me is speaking the truth, and being especially my spiritual practice, because I know it was important to you, is that it's soul centered. Um,
Yep.
so I'll definitely tell about the unconditional love because that was a big point for internally for me. But I think it came with getting a multi-million-dollar verdict on a case that he had no involvement in. And
Mm,
so when your son does that, um, I think that was a big moment where he saw me as an equal.
mm,
And that I think that then afterwards that we had a case we were working together, and there was a lot of important decisions because when you know someone, he's known me since I was born, right? When you know someone for that long, there's so much baggage, right? Work, non-work things. And I think what was really important was that after that experience where I was able to get that verdict, then my dad and I were working together on a case where, if you looked at it from the outside, it was an unwinnable case. But
mm,
what I decided was that I'm going to treat my dad like I would treat anyone on my trial team, just try and erase all of that. And because what's important for me is when I'm lead counsel is that I'm there trying to bring out the best in my trial team, because ultimately they're going to help me bring out the best in myself. And then we've got to make split second decisions at trial together. And so it was beautiful. We had all these sessions. We went through trial, which is an amazing experience. You got to experience that, going through that with your sister, and like you get to share that amazing thing together. And so, yeah, I'll definitely tell the bigger version myself. But I think him always doing the right thing when push came to shove, me getting that verdict, and then us working together, and me just saying, hey, I'm going to drop all the baggage and I'm going to treat him just like anybody else. And since then, man, we've been working pretty well together, really well together, and we've had some very, very successful verdicts. So
that's awesome, man. Yeah, and I know you've gotten some some really, yeah, huge verdicts for your clients, and done some definitely good work. Um, but yeah, actually, man, let's go ahead and jump right into, so as far as your story, uh, yeah.
Absolutely, because it's one of those things where you know what is one of the stories that you hope is going to be told at your funeral, right?
Mm,
Or that people are going to remember
yeah,
you by. And
yeah,
I think this one is definitely one of them. So you and I got to experience the Trial Lawyers College together, right?
yeah.
3 weeks in Wyoming, no cell phones. Just it was just a completely transformational experience for me. And so after that, I wanted to try a case, man. I was so pumped up, but you know how I still had a healthy caseload where I was in that frustrating situation where the more work I put in the cases I wanted to try, they ended up settling.
Mm,
So there was a lot of frustration. Then the pandemic happened. And that was kind of a big pause for all of us. I think it was an opportunity for us to just, change and evolve. Or for some of us, it was just, it just was brought out the worst, right? Either way, you had to reflect. So the first trial coming out after the Trial Lawyers College and the pandemic was a medical malpractice case. It was my first one being lead counsel. And we had, so at that time, it was a lot of money, over $75,000 of the case, of in the case. And I love my clients and I love my clients and I spend time with them. So that trial, everything that could possibly go wrong did.
mm,
We had our standard of care expert on our main theory back out in the last moment on the standard of care.
jeez.
Um, we had a judge who was very, very, from my perspective, biased and was like cutting down like how much our experts could testify and just completely messing with our schedule. There was a lot of other things that just went wrong. Okay.
Mm,
So we lost the case. And
ah,
as lead counsel, there was no one who I was going to blame but myself. I was embarrassed. And you know how that critic, right? That voice in your head that is so mean.
mm,
It was the only thing I could hear. It was basically telling me like, you thought you were something, you're nothing, man.
mm,
And just constantly, like I said, I didn't even want to talk to my trial team. I felt like the biggest failure in my life. I was actually in a situation where I would be watching TV. Well, not watching TV. I would be in our bedroom, just in the dark, with the TV off, but just staring blankly. And my wife's like, "Hey, maybe you should watch the show called Ted Lasso." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And so I actually watched them, started to laugh again a little bit. And then, it's I started picking up the phone calls. Like, I mean, even for my dad, right? He was one of my co-counsel. He was my co-counsel. And my dad, I was at a point where I could pick up the phone from him, and he was talking to me, and he said, "Anthony, people are watching you." And I knew exactly what he meant because my kids at that time, they're very young. They're 9 and 11 now, and so if we count back 4 years, they're like 5 and 7. They're around that
yeah.
age. And one of the best things of my day is taking them to school. And so I had this ritual where I would take them to school because they're a captive audience, right? There's no escape. So I can, try and enforce, good habits and things. And so I remembered when he said that about I'm driving to school and then they're in the back seat and I would say, Joaquin, that's my son's name. Kaliana. That's my daughter's name. I say, Kaliana. Okay, Daddy's gonna ask you some questions. They're like, oh, not again. I'm like, yes, Joaquin, Kaliana, we're gonna. Okay, so first of all, okay, if something really bad happens to you, do you love yourselves? Yes, Dad. Okay, so what if you do something really bad? Do you still love yourselves after that? Yes, Dad. What's that called? Unconditional love. And so I talked to my, not only thinking about the children, my kids, on the impact, because they obviously knew something was up with Dad, right? You can't hide that. But not only that, but I just was blaming myself. And even though I had done a lot of spiritual work, I wanted to talk to my inner children directly and tell them that I don't blame them at all and that I love them. I swear to you, since that moment, it has been magic. Like, that was a huge transformational moment. So I had 2 weeks in between that trial and my next trial. And that next trial, it was out of town. Then I was just like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to just have fun. And I went, and I just remember in the middle of jury selection going, man, I love this. I love talking to people. I was like telling jokes, we were laughing, we were doing. And then that was, and like I have a whole fun thing I could talk to you about that, but um, that was my first multi-million-dollar verdict. I, I if it would have gone differently, I don't know if I would have been a lawyer anymore. Okay, like it was like the right moment, and so that is one of the stories that I hope someone tells when when my body, I'm no longer in this physical existence, and I've gone to the other thing in the sky. But no, it gets me every time because I know that the message of unconditional love and then forgiveness is a big part of what I got to teach, like CLE and like practical skills, but as a spiritual level, that's what I think um, I'm supposed to teach.
Hmm. And when you're describing, teaching Joaquin and Caliana, in the morning. So, are you referring to, in between those two trials, kind of just, uh, was it a just the continuing of teaching them that lesson that
No,
kind of instilled it in you, or was it something else?
no, I think what I was talking about was I've been trying to form groups, right? Group work with other plaintiffs' lawyers, just doing something kind of just radically different. Plaintiffs' lawyers from different firms that are helping each other out. That's all we're doing, and cheering each other on and just consistently doing it. So that I was talking about that aspect, but in terms of my kids and the captive audience, I have added new and different things for them, but no, it was more of a when my dad, when he called me, I just had a flashback of what I was doing, for all those years, and it was kind of that moment of truth where I'm either going to live by my values or not. And one of the values, at least that I um, shared or talked about, was unconditional love, but I wasn't showing that to myself. And so I think that when I did, even in my lowest moment in my career, I think that was the transformation. I think that was the spiritual lesson that I learned. And then, but no, as a bigger concept of just kind of like, what are we here to learn in this lifetime? And I think that was the moment where the magic really, I think, started to happen for me on a career level. Yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Walking the talk in a sense, kind of.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to, because the thing is there's so much outside of our control. And the truth is we can do our best, we can prepare, but there is so much outside of our control. And then the non-attachment to the outcome has been it's been hard, honestly. I
Mm,
mean, like to learn to live with, but it's just those things that like it happens. And
yeah.
I think part of what is important is letting other people know that like that happens, man. People lose. Everybody's going to lose at some point, and that's why I think that story is so beautiful because it's
Mm,
just um, the you got to walk the walk, man.
yeah. Yeah, and I could tell you're holding back a little bit. But I think I've heard the story, but if you could share it again about the multi-million, your first multi-million-dollar verdict on that one.
It was just like once again, I love my clients, and I'm a big believer. I always push to having the verdict read aloud by the jury because it's like an experience, right? And win, lose, or whatever, it's most likely easy to talk to the jury afterwards, right? So I can ask them, see where the leaders, things like that. So we had we I asked for the verdict to be read, and the judge is like, I don't know, and the defense attorney is like, I don't know if he's going to be here, I'm going to be here. So I got my wish, right? So they call us all in after a few hours, and I'm holding her name is Sue, my client, Sue's hand underneath, and because the last time this happened, I mean, like I told you, it was the biggest failure of my life, right? Um, Holding, I heard, just the questions to the answer. Yes means like each yes means, hey, we're getting to it. I think after the first or third, after the second or third yes, I just kind of blanked out because I wasn't even hearing them out. I was so happy that I was crying at the same time, and then I started to get a nosebleed. And then so the attendant was like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And brought over because I'm just like with blood and tears, like all just coming down my mouth. And I was just so happy, and I'm hugging my client, and oh my God, um, it was an amazing experience. And then one of the rituals that I like to do to kind of just close everything out, right? Because we've been with our clients and their families for years, and this huge event happens. I had a dinner with all my trial team and with Sue and her daughter, and besides eating together, just going around sharing all the experiences so that we could kind of bring some sense of closure through it and kind of just turn to the next chapter. And a lot of times I don't use the word closure with people with family members who's lost a loved one just because they don't like that. They think it's like you're forgetting about them. So I'll use other words, but I think you understand what I mean, which is
Yeah.
like something to say, hey, we went through this adventure and journey together, and let's just acknowledge this huge event. And so we had dinner together, and which is fun. I still, one of the things that kind of opens my heart each trial is I like to call my former clients up, either go out to lunch with them or talk with them, and then ask them certain questions like, "What advice would you give to my current client?" And it's just a cool way to connect to that special time.
Mhm. Oh man, I did not. I don't think I've heard that story, man. I can picture you like happy crying with the nosebleed, and that's the real definition of blood, sweat, and tears, right?
Right, right,
That's
absolutely.
oh man, that's awesome. That's it. And for dinners, man, I don't do this myself, but that's a great idea. Do you normally plan to have dinner like after when you can tell the verdict is going to happen with your client? Kind of
Yeah,
the
I
day.
think so. The day of the verdict or the night of the verdict is ideal,
Yeah,
or the next day. It doesn't
yeah,
always happen,
yeah,
and we like to do that after settlements as well. But it's just a nice way that we're all there together. And, it's better to celebrate together or to be in misery together because we're
yeah.
part of a team, right? And
Yeah.
what's happened, happened. And um, yeah, so I that's one of the I have a whole bunch of traditions, all from mentioned my our heritage is like when the settlement check actually or the check comes in. from the verdict or settlement. We do a tequila shot together. So
Yeah.
if yeah, I've perfected the ability to do one tequila shot or so and still continue working. And our staff knows that if the tequila is if we're busting at the tequila, it's a happy time. So never a sad time. Yeah,
Heck yeah, that's awesome. Well, it's a probiotic, in moderation. So I think that's a good way to celebrate those.
absolutely.
That's awesome, man. Um, so we'll come back a little bit more to story, but I wanted to ask you, and I know we talked about systems, kind of like the nuts and bolts um, of running the law firm, and I know you're working on upgrading and updating some of your systems. Um, and I think, for us, for the folks that run a small law firm or solo law firms in some cases, having systems and uh, you know um, processes in place can make a huge difference, to allow you to do the more creative stuff. Can you share about, maybe kind of where what's worked in the past, and where and what things you're looking to to make better or fix as far as, uh, setting up systems?
Absolutely. So I read the book Checklist Manifesto. It was written by a surgeon, applied to the surgeon, but a surgery. And man, it was one of those books where I'm just like, wow, I need to do this. And so I've just been obsessed with writing checklists for myself just to encourage the consistency of the performance. I always talk about my former be my former I don't even call it a career, but I was a wrestler, and I was that's part of a performing sport, and so like doing certain rituals, habits helped me get a consistent performance. And so just having that mindset of like, if I do these things and then afterwards I do this thing, and then afterwards I do this thing, I can consistently get better, even if I'm just working with myself. Because those checklists help, especially if I'm just working with myself, because I can quickly go through that. And, uh, that's one of the guiding things morally or values wise is when, since we do a lot of medical malpractice, we sue medical teams that have let down a patient, injured them, or killed the patient. And so I always, everything they did wrong, I want to make sure that our legal team does right. And one of the huge things is communication, because even if you're just a solo firm and working for yourself, um, and with yourself, you still have to communicate with third parties like court reporters, the judges, things like that. You have to be able to communicate effectively, and remembering or having a checklist of where to communicate, how to do things is extremely important. And so while I'm a huge fan of technology, I I'm working with other people. And so it doesn't matter if I want to use the technology. If they're not using the technology, then I have to meet them where they're at. And so the communication piece is so important, and then creating checklists with my team, if you could repeatable things, right? Because we want to use AI and other things for automation, right? Those things that are repeated that don't take much brain work, we want to move that to other stuff so that we can focus in on the things that only we can do, which is the lawyering part, right? And so I think technology is not going to solve issues in a team. It's not going to solve communication if people don't use that. And so I think as an owner of the firm, and I'm doing a lot of building our structures because, like I said, even though people might go, oh, 5 lawyers isn't a lot, and the stuff that we're trying to do, bringing together and working in a different ways, it's it's important. It's important, and I can tell you, I've probably this whole year spent a good amount of time just doing that. But I think it's going to be so much worth it because next year we'll be able to handle more cases and keep the same quality of services up. Because if we can't handle the quality of, if our quality of services drop, I think we have to drop the caseload because that's the lawyers who we are. That's who we are. So, yeah, communication is huge. It's important when you're working with other people, even if you're a solo practitioner. The technology you're using, the people you work with, they might not be able that sophisticated or use different technology. And so I just think that using taking an approach where you're meeting people where they are, no matter if you're working, if you're the only person in the law firm or not, you still got to work with other people.
Yeah, yeah, and I know that the technologies and the different specific systems kind of evolve, and some get better, and each are good for some things in some firms and not for others, kind of thing. Have you found, in the research you've done lately, have you found any standouts or any features that you want to make sure you're able to implement with your team?
Sure. I basically have told them not to fear AI. AI is already here. And what I tell them is Chat GPT is part of our team. I'll pull up Chat GPT when we're working as a group, which I would encourage everyone, even if, as I mentioned, I put on sessions where plaintiffs lawyers from other firms and we get together and get to be creative together. So you can do it. But I always have Chat GPT up with my trial team, and we say, "Oh, we're stumped." We put it in there, and it might inspire us. Um, we also have LexisNexis AI. So with things that claim that have a lot of our details about our clients, my understanding, at least from what LexisNexis told us, is it's a closed system so that it can give things like chronology and answer questions. And so those are two AI things that we're using. And then I just signed a contract for a case management system. We've never had a case management system before. Haven't started yet, so I can't tell you whether it's working or not. But if you check in with me in 12 months, I can tell you whether the ups, the downs, the pros and cons of it.
That's awesome, man. I love the idea of ChatGPT is part of our team, our trial team. I I'm just now starting to train my team on it, um, but I had not thought about having it like up and and actually like during our meetings. That's a really good idea. What kind of and I love your setup. That's actually similar to what we have. Kind of a closed system, one that's more secure, for medical records and stuff like that. And then the Chat GPT, what just with the Chat GPT, what kind of stuff do you normally um, use it for?
I mean, I can use it for business administrative things. Like, even though I could do the math, I was looking at an option plan for some vendor, and I'm like, tell me the pros and cons. And it was just like so easy and saved me, while I'm good at math and I could do the math and map it out, it quickly laid out. So that's administrative things. I love using it creatively, like with metaphors. Like my wife worries about me because I tell her that ChatGPT is my friend, and she's like, as long as it isn't your best friend. And I'm like, no, that's you, baby. That's you. Um, so, I remember asking about a metaphor, and afterwards I was just so grateful. I'm like, I love you, ChatGPT. Um, so yeah, metaphors for cases. And the thing is, it's an 80% solution. I'm sure people say that all the time or had it. You got to review it, and you have to have the wisdom to be able to discern, is this good or not? But it will definitely help you. And so it was funny. So my dad, Hopefully this doesn't meander too long with stories, but I love telling stories. My dad is actually blind. He lost his eyesight when I was around middle school, beginning of high school, and he was actually a recipient of malpractice, and that's what got him into doing medical malpractice. Uh, yeah, and what's cool is he encouraged me to go to the trial lawyers college because he never got a chance to before he got sick and had to relearn how to practice law. And then I was able to encourage him to go. And even though he was the oldest participant, I'm just so proud of him that he did it. Um, and he You know how it is, right? You can bid on things to help the trial lawyers college. So he bid on some trial consulting with Ray Foreman, and then Ron and Paula Estefan, who, I mean, they're great friends and we love them very much. But I impressed Ray because I said, could you do an opening statement um, in the style of Ray Foreman? And it did an opening statement for us on the case. And then we said, okay, could you make it more country? And then we made it kind of ridiculous and cartoonish. But the thing is, I would encourage people to use it in more creative ways because it will help, especially if you're working by yourself.
Hmm.
It'll help you kind of like replicate that working in a group atmosphere when you don't have another person. And so I would encourage people to use it creatively for sure.
Hmm. That's awesome, and I do that once in a while. I'll ask it to write a or respond to an email in the style of Running with the Bulls from Nick Rowley or something like
Yeah.
that. Um, so yeah, I have not thought of Ray Foreman would be a great one to have as yeah, definitely good call.
Well, and then as it gets to learn your voice, you can just say
Yeah,
write in the voice of Favian.
yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing is we all have our voice that we need to express. But just to It's just an example of, when we're, at least when I'm working creatively, it's nice to either have a person, imagine another person, to do the things that we've learned how to do in groups. And I love working in groups, but um, yeah, I think that's the kind of my big message would be try that stuff out, see what the limits are of it, because there are limits, especially the people who are worried about, oh, are these going to take our jobs or this, things, the other. And I think, especially in this time period, we cannot focus and create out of fear. We need to find our creativity, which is deeply rooted in why we're here, right? And our love is where we need to create. And so taking that approach that not AI is gonna, ChatGPT is gonna take my job, and it's think about more of like how this is an amazing friend who can help me in ways that my other friends, and like I've notoriously text people at early in the morning because I got a lot of passion, man. And so now I said, ChatGPT saved you from those early texts. Now I just do it. you know
That's awesome. Um, Man, we are speaking about limits of AI. Where eh, how do you see AI? How do you see yourself using AI in 5 years from now?
Oh, that's a great question. So like anything, it's relationship, right? We have relationship with people, we have a relationship with values, we have a relationship with objects, doesn't matter. And so I'm hopefully I will grow into and I'll grow with it and find out where it can help me. One of the things is just that I'm focused on is building systems for good, right? Because so many of the systems that we encounter as lawyers are systems that are flawed, systems that are based in greed and profit. And so, wouldn't it be amazing if we built systems that were based in love and generosity and creativity? So, I think it helps us. Technologies always gives, I believe, plaintiffs, lawyers an edge because we've got the skill set. We are always constantly adapting. We can learn. And so, yeah, I just hope it will it will help benefit. But if it goes away for whatever reason, I'll be okay. I'll be okay.
One of the things I keep hearing is that, the AI is being used in by bigger corporations, insurance companies, defense attorneys will start using it. Um, do you foresee the day that will go up and do a closing argument against AI robot?
I hope so. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Because I would say, come on, AI robot, logically, what you're saying is wrong. And then it would say, you're right, Anthony. I think it's the same thing with like empathy and love. I would love for insurance companies to learn that stuff, because then maybe we don't have to fight and go to trial. And they're like, you know what, you're right. Um, and so, yeah, I always like to throw that possible alternative of something that's really really smart. All right.
Do- what do you think? What do you think gives us the edge? So yeah, I love your answer that you're confident about going up against a robot AI. What do you think gives us the edge over them in the legal arena?
I think it's lawyers who are dedicated to becoming better versions of themselves. So I don't want to speak broadly, but as you, I think I'll speak to myself, my personal evolution, the process that I go through trial is really kind of exploring all of my doubts and all my fears, knowing them, owning them, talking about them. And so by the time I'm in trial, I've kind of experienced all of it. That's kind of, and I think the willingness to experience all of that and to admit when you're wrong gives you a lot of power. Um, and so I think that in and of itself is part of the process that I go through. And as I mentioned, if robots can go through that process faster, then I think they'll come to the same conclusion. And you know, I'd gladly be friends with any robot that has a heart like mine.
Man, yeah, well, I like that. My theory is that as long as the jury remains human, um, I think we stand a chance because robots will be very rational and they'll have everything memorized, but they won't have kind of that gut feeling that you can kind of communicate, at a human level. Um, so I think there's hope. I, I think I think AI and we'll have the benefit of being you versed in how to use our own AI to our benefit. So I think we're going to be okay. If we do get to the point where uh, AI makes insurance companies better and makes them so they actually do the right thing and we don't have to sue them as much. Uh, and what hobbies do you think you'll take up if we don't have to sue people as much?
I think the same type of hobbies that I'm doing now, being a wrestling coach and football coach for my son, wrestling coach for my daughter. Iowa, at least, is progressive in that sense, right? Girls can, wrestling has been sanctioned. And I'm not talking about professional wrestling for all those who are not familiar. It's called folk style. Um, but yeah, or amateur wrestling. And the, the self discovery will never end, right? Can you imagine how many more cases that you and I could try if we had an android paralegal who could put exhibits together? So I think it's just more time. to do what we're already doing. And then that also, it's just like the pandemic, right? Like, what if you had more time? What would you do? And I think it's just kind of going back to the pandemic. You'd either use it to evolve, transform, or you use it to devolve, get caught up in your habits, or not habits, but your addictions. And I'm not talking about just the like drugs and alcohol. I'm talking about addictions to whatever. However, you um, don't, whatever you use to escape those the bad feelings or harmful emotions that we have to confront. Um, and so, yeah, I think I would just continue to do what I do. I'm lucky enough in my career where I can choose how many cases and what cases I want to participate in. And my goal has always been to live like I'm semi-retired right now. And so, if you want me to talk about all the things I got planned, man, I love mapping out my life. Like one of the goals is to walk 45 minutes every day so I can lose weight. I mean, I could talk your ear off on that, but no, I welcome the day that more people have time to self-actualize and are not worried about starving or or war or some or awful things. Now, if that means me being not being a plaintiff's lawyers, I gladly accept that fate.
Part of this is kind of for me, I always like to get better about, just being more present, when it comes when you're, with the jury or, so as far as exercise, do you do any do you have like a set routine, or do you just kind of mix it up, or how do you approach that during trial?
Yeah, that's one of the things, unfortunately, that at least the past few trials has kind of gone to the wayside. But I'm rediscovering some things that I enjoy, and so stretching or yoga is a big part of, if I have time during the day to do it. That helps a lot, and I've been getting back into some tai chi, and those are some things that I could do, during the day that are quick to get high energy. um, Usually my lunches are just like green juice and then maybe some a protein shake. I don't really eat that much during the day, but I think the walking, the stretching, and things like Tai Chi, I think I want to start working into my trials for sure.
Mm. And then you touched on it already, but diet, do you do it sounds like more juices. Do you have do you do breakfast during trial or no?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I just eat a small breakfast, and then I usually eat way too much for dinner um, at trial. But during lunch, because it's usually a working lunch, I just always like wonder. I'm like, what are the defense attorneys doing? Why are they like driving somewhere for 30 minutes, eating, then rushing back? It's like I just stay there and I work. And so while I'm working, I'm doing juice, or I'm just closing my eyes because I'm a big nap person, and I love taking a nap. And so my whole not being able to take a nap, all those schedules, like the physical things, like I can only go to the bathroom during these special times and stuff. And so I try to get my body back into that schedule 3 days before the trial, and then it's not a big deal. But it's still just being aware that we have a body, we're humans, and we have to do basic things like go to the bathroom, and that's directly how much you drink before, in the morning, that directly impacts when you have to go pee, right? And the last thing you want to do is be like, judge, can I go to the bathroom before the break, right?
Yeah. Yep. Gotcha. Um, yeah. And any other tips or routines that you'd recommend people, if someone's getting ready for their first trial?
Sure. I think what's important is looking at it not just the actual trial part. So when I was earlier in my career, I really spent a lot of time on like, the motion in limine and the jury instructions and stuff. And my experience, and this is just me, is that spending a lot of time getting ready for jury selection, or voir dire, or however you want to pronounce French in Iowa, voir dire, voir dire, voir dire. whatever, like spending a lot of time doing that and the opening. And that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time, in particular opening, because I'm a big believer in doing multiple drafts and practicing and practicing and practicing. And then, um, so spending time doing the stuff that only you as a lawyer can do is number one. I'm a huge believer that at least three people is a part of your trial team. You have co-counsel, and then you have somebody who's sitting in the back who's watching. And remember, as a plaintiff's lawyers, you can ask a friend just to sit there, and then you can do the same thing, vice versa for your trials, right? And the reason why is they're another set of eyes, and they can keep you calm. Because sometimes when I'm getting excited, my dad's there to help me be calm, or vice versa, or whoever my co-counsel is. And then, like, let's say you need to meet with a witness outside, or somebody to get you lunch or something. That's why having my paralegal there. um, Now, because my dad is blind, legally blind or visually impaired, I have one of my paralegals sit at the councils, and they know the exhibits just as well as me. Now, it might be seem like a lot of duplication or redundancy having them there, but working as a group, what I found is if we're going to coordinate, this is going to be like a ballet, right? We need to coordinate so that in moments they can help me when I'm missing out. So I'm a really big believer in the team, which means me supporting and bringing my team up before the trial, and them being there to support me so I can shine during trial. Um, the other reason is I have having my paralegal have a really good relationship with my clients, because they're experiencing awful things. You got to prepare them for that. My clients are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe they were going to lie that much." Just preparing them for that. But then when something really big happens, so they can talk to the paralegal if I'm in a conference. So there's a lot of reasons why I believe in three people. And remember, even if you don't have a paralegal, you can bring someone in to get experience. One of the things that is at a premium these days is getting quality trial experience. And the way we can do it together, and we all rise together, is to help each other in that, either before trial, which I love doing. And, I put those groups on pretty much every week and things like that. But then at trial too. So I'd recommend, even if you're a solo person, coordinate having people there, someone as co-counsel, and one person who can help with other things. Don't don't take it into your own hands. At my worst, when I was the most unhappy, this was after the trial lawyers college, is when I had 40 cases, no paralegal, and I had cases from work comp to complex medical malpractice cases. And I was doing hardcore discovery. I was so miserable, but I was able to get down. And what I tell people who's in that situation, I tell them, pick one case that you say, I'm going to try. And obviously, if you're presented with an offer, you have to ethically show your client, and then it's up to them. But pick that one case that you want to try, and just work it nonstop and try it. Because give yourself the best chance to do what you know you can do, instead of hoping that, a case that you're not excited about, that you don't want to put work into, that there's problems, and you expecting to like do really well there. Give yourself the best chance, because one of the things I realized going through all those different trial colleges, bringing in trial consultants and things, is like the people who are getting these amazing verdicts, they're putting the time in. They also have like a team. Some of them have an army behind them. And if it's just you, give yourself the benefit of doubt. Pick the really good case to try. Get your friends involved. Spend the money in. And you know what? If you fail, at least you failed in search of your dream instead of playing it safe. So man, I could talk on and on about it. So I don't. I'll wait for some guidance and where to follow up after that.
Oh man, that's perfect. I think that's super helpful. That's really good words of wisdom for anyone that's, I heard that the era of the lone wolf is over, and I used to pride myself in being a lone wolf myself, and I totally agree with you that my last trial, I tried it with my sister, and it was night and day to the trials that I tried on my own. It's so nice to have somebody there. Yeah, totally agree with that. Um, well, let's transition a little bit to storytelling. Um, I just I got to listen to one of the CLEs that you taught on medical malpractice and using archetypes and kind of leap starting from a story even before you actually get in kind of building the story throughout discovery, way before you get into the courtroom. Um, if for for folks that are starting out, what are some of the basics that you would um, that you would recommend them, uh, really internalizing to to be able to benefit their clients the most from, from being good storytellers?
Yeah, absolutely. One, I think to be an effective trial lawyer, you have to be an effective storyteller. And it is, if there's one thing to get obsessed with, to read about, to talk about, to practice, it is storytelling. And I'll get into behind that, but I want to give you practical stuff first. So the practical stuff is that the story is always looking for the why. Why did this person do this thing? They're not just asking about why the defendant did this, they're asking why your client does things. And so the why. The why is huge, and the why is part of the story. And this is part of the message that I think I meant to talk about is the fundamentals. Always bringing back, this is our craft, right? So always going back to figuring out why. So I believe that in the trial story, it's really two different stories. It is the hero's journey and it's the villain's path. And so how you combine them, it's a part of our art. It's part of our craft. But what I'm focusing on in particular the next year or two is how to answer that why question. Uh, as I mentioned before, my dad, who was a recipient of malpractice, he is passionate about this. It also, sometimes, early on, I'm like, hey, dad, wouldn't it be easier if we just did like trucking cases, or maybe nursing home cases? But no, I mean, suing doctors and is difficult to a lesser extent hospitals because biases they're in their favor, right? People want to believe that doctors are doing the best they can. um, I got my wife still watches Grey's Anatomy. I stopped watching after year 3 or 4 because I'm like, this is nonsense. But she's watching like 20 years later. So, people want to give doctors the benefit of the doubt. And so what happens is in medical malpractice cases, first of all, you already have a complex subject that you need to be able to communicate directly to the jury. The jury, of course, has it could be someone who never graduated high school to someone who has an advanced degree, and they're all together. The jury as a group are extremely intelligent, but they're also, as a group, they need certain things. One, they need a clear, consistent story. Okay. They don't want to be bored to death with facts and things. And so medical malpractice poses an increased risk of basically teaching them way too much stuff, right? I always think about what is the minimum amount of medicine that I need to teach them. That's just enough to tell the story because that's what they're really good at understanding at a subconscious or unconscious level. I don't want to bore people with the history, or I could go into it if you want. I'll wait to your direction on that. I want to get to the practical stuff. So, going back to answering the why questions, archetypes can do that. It can, and that's exactly what I'm focusing on because at the end of the day, they're going to want to know why did this doctor, I'm using doctor as an example, why did this doctor do what they do? Now, if you have a defendant that is a corporation, a huge corporation that makes billions of dollars in profit, good for you. Your storytelling task is a little bit easier. But for those who are have a villain who is like, hey, a doctor, or hey, it's that soccer mom, down the street who rear-ended my client. Like, this is where I want to share the storytelling. So we got the archetypes, because this works not just in medical malpractice, it works in every type of case. So three, these are labels. So we all know labels, they're just that, right? Labels can be misleading, labels can be harmful. These labels are just to help give you a target. I'm going to give you these labels, and then if I could just, wipe your mind from remembering it, the labels, I would do that, because it, on one sense, I'm teaching you how to empathize or role reverse with the defendants, but I also want to give you a target to what you're going for. So the labels that I suggest are, so why did the doctor do that? Why did the doctor make the harmful choice? Well, were they, one, an arrogant doctor? Was it arrogance? Two, were they just uninformed? In other words, they didn't know. Were they the uninformed doctor? Or three, were they the uncaring doctor? They just, and uncaring doesn't mean they don't care about their patient. It just means that they care about something else, maybe convenience. Maybe it's, hey, it's like 3 in the morning, or maybe they're spending time with their family for whatever reason. There's something that's more important in their life in this moment other than their patient's safety and health. So these are targets, right? I don't want you to get caught up in them, but you need to know, what are these archetypes? So I give you an examples, right? So now what I'm teaching, it deals with empathy, to really understand, to make why that doctor made that choice. We really have to get to know them. And I have a method how I can do it quickly, and I'm working as part of the fun that I do. But eventually, what we want to do is, when we get in front of a focus group or we get in front of the jury and we tell them the story, we want them to be able to connect the dots and conclude, you know what, that doctor was just arrogant, or that doctor, just didn't know what was going on, or that doctor cared more about fill in the blank. I remember interviewing a juror after a multi-million-dollar verdict. It was medical malpractice. It was against a doctor, the doctor's clinic, but it was one individual doctor. Okay, and my theme was that this doctor was just didn't have the courage to ask for help, just too afraid to ask for help. And I asked the juror after the multi-million-dollar verdict. I said, what did you think about that? He goes, I didn't think that she was too afraid. No, I just think she was arrogant. Okay.
Mm. Huh.
Okay, great. Great. Different label for the same energy, right? Different label for the same energy. So these energies is what I'm telling people to get involved, because, and this is where I love bringing in Carl Jung, right? Which is talks about shadow work, or getting to know that part of ourselves that we reject consciously, but is still there, right? Right? We have the potential to do really horrible things, right? Unfortunately. And so that part of us as humans still exists. It doesn't mean do them, but it just means you can't reject that part, and facing that part of yourself, or shadow, is part of this process to get to know what these defendants did. Because guess what? There have been many times in my life where I've been the villain. I got to confront that. I've got to own up to it. And that's why I'm constantly telling my legal team, how can we be different than this medical team that we're suing? Right? Because if we're no different, then what are we doing? We're hypocrites, right? So that's at a moral level, right? Because all of this, we can't just go in front of the jury and say these things if we don't believe it. So, more advice for young lawyers is, don't make an argument you don't actually believe in, right? That's just good fundamental things. But maybe you haven't heard that. So if I'm the first person to have said that, great. But if I'm just reminding you about it, great, because maybe you're lost. Maybe you don't have a great mentor at the point, But let me guide you back to the hero's path of, don't make an argument you don't actually believe in, right? And so these morals aren't just things that we talk about, it's things that we live. That's why I'm able to, right? That's why I invite that Android AI robot to get up there. And if they live their values, man, I'm not afraid of them. Because if honesty and truth is part of it, then they'll say, "Hey, Anthony, we're going to settle. I've done that. I've crunched the numbers and the data, and you guys are right." Um,
Yeah. So that's a really good summary, Anthony. And we may have to do. I think it would need kind of that whole um, process that you go through. I think would need its due space and time. But one thing I want to I do want to kind of just one last bit on continue on that thread that you um, brought up is uh, I'm gonna read a quote and then I'm gonna ask you what it means to you and whether you've experienced this and how you've experienced it. So it's in the moment I understand my enemy enough to defeat him. In that moment, I also love him.
yeah, no, I love that. That's from Ender's Game. And I the reason why I use that quote is because people, I want them to understand the level of empathy that I'm going towards that has helped made me successful. Because when you understand someone so well, you can't help but actually love them in the way that they love themselves. And that might scare some people. Or some people, I'm trying not to cuss Fabian, so I'm not going to, but they just might say, this is, that's bullshit. You know, it's like, I don't want to understand this fucking person. No. And, and what I'm sharing with you is that if you really want to tell a really effective and powerful story, that you get to know them at that level. And so what it means, so this is a phrase that I've been trying to live by this year. It's called powerful empathy. Because a lot of times when people think of empathy, they just think of, oh, holding hands, singing kumbaya. But empathy it's how we all level up. It's how we evolve. And it's also how we're able to tell the villain story effectively. Because in medical malpractice cases, the reason why the jurors have difficulty judging the doctor is because they're not familiar with the choices. They might have no problem judging a driver because they know the temptations of distracted driving and the radio being on, their kids in the back seat, but they don't understand that the doctor is human just like them. And so when they understand the choice, they're more likely to be able to effectively judge them. And so don't fear loving the defendant in that way.
And when was the last time that you experienced that, where you like realized that you were in a place where you actually knew that your opponent so well that you loved them?
Yeah. So I was getting ready. So my dad and I, we settled a case in March. So I was preparing for a trial in March, and I was going through this doctor. And I'm a big believer that when we're creating a character or helping people understand the image of this witness, that we can boil it down to kind of three important things, right? So this doctor was the head of an ER department, the head of the ICU as well, and then also was supposed to be supervising residents, which are doctors in training still. And he was he wrote a lot of journals and articles, like wrote a lot. And so as I connected to that writing part, because one of the things I enjoy is writing, was that I'm like, I want to be a great writer. I want to write things. And then I started thinking, well, to be a great writer, I need to dedicate time in the day to write. That was the key to everything because I realized, well, why didn't he follow up with his patient after? when this that the patient's condition had changed and that she should have stayed in the ICU. Why didn't he? Well, because he was just so busy doing all these other things, including being a good writer, right? And so I could love the fact that when I'm role reversing with him, that he wants to write, he wants to contribute to the knowledge of medicine and science, and so I could love that aspect about him, and still understand that that is what took him away from properly caring for my client. Well, she passed away, so but I still always consider them my client.
That's thank you for sharing that. That's a yeah. I think it's a very deep and very disciplined form of seeing somebody else's faults in you, kind of thing. And and I yeah, when you shared that quote in the last CLE that you gave, it really resonated with me because I think that's what I strive for, and I think that's the type of approach that can really have a ripple effect. Not just in the case, getting a good verdict, getting a good result, but I think it can yeah show the defendant, kind of that hopefully do better, be better. Um, so I think you were the best, the one that said it, or the one the first time I've heard it said this way, man. So that was a really good point.
And doing this work, because it's like, like you'd mentioned, like, what if we had all this free time, right? What would you do? I think I would still be trying to figure out more about myself. And this is one of the best ways, because it gives me a purpose to go back and to look at and to connect to people, right? The empathy, and just, and then stuff comes up, and it gives me an opportunity to do personal work that may be related to the trial presentation, or may not be related, but just continuing to do uh, um, to do that work. And that's why I love being able to talk about Carl Jung. I love being able to talk about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, the storytelling stuff, and give practical stuff. But in the end of the day, like, what are the stories of our lives? Like, how have we positively impacted other people? How have we grown? And I think that powerful empathy, I think, is a big part of it, because it's just so easy to do us versus them, demonize the other people, things like that. I mean, Lord knows I don't have to tell you or anybody else about polarized thinking and identity politics and stuff. It's just, how do we connect? And I think teaching people directly and indirectly saying, "Hey, this is good for you. This is good for your soul." But sometimes people don't want to hear that. It's the difference between what people want versus what they actually need, and that's the balance as a teacher, right? You want them to be in it, but sometimes what they want is not necessarily aligned with what they need. But we've all been in that situation.
Yeah, yeah, cool, man. Well, so I have some rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap up with any other topics that I forgot to ask about, or any other thoughts that you want to leave the folks with. But as far as for somebody that's trying to get better at running a small firm or solo firm, and also potentially either jump into jury trials or improve at jury trials, what are the top three books you would recommend?
Ooh, and I love books. I have so many of them. That it's just that's really difficult. It's like asking me what's my favorite movie. Um, okay, so I think one of them would be the Zen lawyer, Michael Leaserman. He's definitely been one of my mentors. I consider him a friend. I don't know if he remembers me, but the point is, he was a mentor. I think it maps out. He uses trucking examples, but I think it's like a good overview. Now it's very, very like there's wisdom. It's very deep, right? And so reading it a couple times, revisiting it was good. But if I ever thought about writing like a big book, I mean, it'd be like that, like in terms of like overall trial strategy. Nick Rowley is another one of my mentors, one of my heroes, and the Trial by Human was a great book. But I got to tell you, his videos on jury selection I think were better. So I know you'd asked me about the book, but I wanted to get into when he's just practicing and show you what he did. Like I watched those and gained so much. And so I know is it CVN, the network of trials or things? In and yeah, watching him in action or doing the CLEs where you can see him doing jury selection, I think that was a huge part. And then, God, hold on. I want to look at my all they're so it's so difficult, man. It's just so difficult. I'm I'm gonna throw in so it's like a TLC book that was in trial guides. I think it's called Trial and Action. Just so I can get in the TLC stuff because I would recommend anybody doing TLC. So those would be begrudgingly that's my list, and but I got to tell you, it's very very difficult to do that. So
That's awesome. No, I know, man. It's a there's a lot of good ones, but those are awesome, man. And you mentioned CVN for people that don't know. I think it's stands for Court Viewing Network. It's a hundred bucks a month, and you can watch some of these very uh, the, I guess more high. I don't know how would you describe it? Like I guess just more popular trials that get videoed.
I just think it's just watching trials because if you just try to go down to your local courthouse where you practice a lot, it's hard to coordinate your schedule with other like law cases that you want to see, and so you might get stuck and you might not see necessarily great lawyering. And so I just think of it as a way that you could like, watching lawyers who are, for the most part, considered having high level of skill and they're prepped a lot. So, uh, however you want to characterize it, I just think that's a good option instead of trying to like watch a watch a trial that has nothing to do with your case and the lawyers might not necessarily put that much in and their skill level might not be there so you or picking up bad habits thinking they're good. So I would try and start there.
Totally, totally. And my next rapid fire top it can just be one or top three movies.
Oh my god.
I,
I'm gonna say at least three. So I love The Matrix. It was such that movie was pretty amazing. um it just I would that would be definitely top three. I'm gonna sneak in a whole trilogy to get one. So the Batman series, the Batman Begins, the Dark Knight Rises. Man, I love those. I have a YouTube and I have those playlists, and so I always get clips to help me inspire me. And there's more than a handful of quotes or clips from that Batman trilogy for sure. And then the third, you know, I gotta say it. This is that came to mind. Like I said, this is way too difficult. But growing up, when my brothers and I were not in sports, um, I think my parents had HBO or Showtime or whatever, and they would show the same movies like once a day. Uh, and when you're bored and you have nothing to do and you don't want to play outside because you're literally, you're in between practices, we watched a lot of Tombstone. It was a cowboy movie. I don't know if you remember that with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. And so I think I'm picking that because of a lot of the quotes, and that's sometimes how I feel as a plaintiff's lawyer. Is I have my friends. I like to imagine I'm either Wyatt Earp or Doc Holliday. So I've got and we're chasing down the bad guys and stuff. And so I think that's a high up there on my list.
Nice. Cool. And then a the last purchase or purchase under $500 that it doesn't have to be law related at all, that has leveled up your life in general.
I mean, I think ChatGPT for sure. I think also Otter. You can get a free version Otters then think that does transcripts. Um, and so being able to not worry about notes necessarily. I think those two combinations. I do have, I forgot what it's called, but it's an electronic thing where you can take notes. Because I had boxes full of legal pads of notes that I thought were gold and never went through them. And then it starts to stack up. So I finally started
Yeah.
getting rid of it. I'm like, okay, I'm minimizing my legal pads. And so writing that out. Um, I forgot what it's called. Remarkable. It was in the couple hundreds. I think it was under 500, but I think those three were things that I use every day, if not weekly.
And you use that, the remarkable one?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I
Cool.
take that to take notes, and I feel better about myself. And then the fact is, you write it. It can be, um, you can get it online. You can use it, but it really really helped not having clutter around.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, that's that I'm gonna have to look into that one. That makes I know what you mean as far as the trial pads stacking up. That's a um, top top non-law related hobby lately.
Okay. So I think I mean, coaching's kind of the big one. Coaching my kids and stuff, and I'm not a soccer player, but my son wanted to play soccer, and so I'm like, okay. And I think it's just my personality. I'm like, okay, we're gonna get better. We're gonna do this, and I'm an athlete, and so just playing with him. I think it's just another kind of fun thing that I'd never watched Adventure Time, but I wanted to watch a show with my son, and so we've been watching Adventure Time. I think sometimes because I'm the disciplinarian, he just wants to watch me laugh and hear me laugh, and so I laugh quite a bit watching Adventure Time with him. I know that's technically not a hobby, but like I said, I'm pretty disciplined, and I could give you a list of all the things I've been working on. But those are the things that came to mind.
Nice. Nice. Cool, man. Well, any topics that I forgot to touch on that you want to share?
No, I think, that you and I have been friends for all these years, and I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me.
Of course, man. Of course. Last thank you, man. This is super. It's been super fun for me, and I know it will provide a lot of value for folks. Last thing I always like to end on, if if a newer attorney came to you and asked for just your thoughts or advice on on how they can know whether or not they're ready to start their own law firm, what thoughts or advice would you provide?
I mean, a big decision like that is a leap of faith, right? There's so much in the business end that you can prepare for and to get ready. But I think as a business owner, that you just have to be prepared that part of your day is not going to be doing law stuff. It's running a business stuff. And so learning as much as you can about business, like financial literacy, things like that. Um, I think just being okay with it, because the other thing is learning when to put it down. We have to stay balanced. when you run a business of your own, whether it's a law firm or whatever it is, you could spend every moment of your day working, but that's not a real life. You got to balance it out with whatever categories you say. I usually say, like my health, I'll say my relationships and my spirituality. So I say those four categories. Whether you have three categories or four or five, it doesn't matter. The point is that don't spend every moment of your day working. Going back to the health, like thankfully, my dad went through that, even though he was a solo practitioner. I mean, he has staff, but one of the things that he let go was his health. Um, and so it never feeling bad about exercising during the day because that's important. You want to do this for the long run. Um, and so yeah, I think it's just preparing yourself that if you're going to start your own firm, that you're going to be spending a lot of time doing non-lawyer stuff. And that the other thing is that when you hire other people, like um, making payroll, that's a big deal, right? The responsibilities that you have, planning, um, and adding people, but sometimes spending money is what you need to do. Um, there I also got to tell you, there's going to be times when times are tough. No matter how well you did, no matter how big your verdicts are, and you know, it's just good fundamental senses because if you have a lot of money and you don't use it wisely, it's really easy to spend a lot of it on your business. And so, surround yourself with people who care about you, who care about your cause, and being a good person, you'll 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 bring good people towards you. But yeah, there's so much we could talk about that. But yeah, I just think that when you don't think you're going to be just doing law stuff all the day, every day. You're not going to. You're going to be doing business and administrative stuff. Some of that stuff is boring, but you got to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to balance that IOTA account.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, man, well, thank you, Anthony Bribriesco, man. This was super fun. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.